What makes a crappie so special? Well, first of all, they're a fish of all seasons and can be caught by anyone in lots of different ways. They're also one of the tastiest fish that live in our waterways. Today, I'd like for you to join me as we discuss some of the best ways of catching these prolific fish in a show we call Popular Crappie Techniques. It'll include shallow methods for inactive fish, catching suspended crappie with ultralight, long pulling deep isolated cover, getting wet for crappie, when a slip cork really pays off, advantages to tight lining shallow cover, and if time permits, we'll cover a couple more. Let's start with a technique that has worked for me many times, especially when crappie move shallow and tight to cover. Here, vertical fishing can be one of the most productive methods to use. Now, this is especially true when fish become super inactive due to a rapid change in water temperature, a change in barometric pressure, or a rise and fall in water levels. During these periods, a motionless offering works wonders. The method I prefer to use is similar to regular vertical fishing, but with one exception. Instead of tight lining, a slip cork is used. During element changes like the ones mentioned, crappie have the tendency to drop deeper into and around cover. And by adjusting the slip cork to different depths, you'll be able to establish the one that'll produce best. Once a depth pattern is established, you'll be able to constantly place your bait at the correct level and keep it there. This entices more strikes than any way I know of. Now watch this, and I'll show you how it works. There's one. Oh, yes, sir. Oh, I can't. I'm gonna pull you up like that. Now, that's a neat way to catch them. And believe it or not, the more you move your bait, the less effective it'll be. Okay, let's take a look at another very effective method, and that's catching deep suspended crappie on ultralight gear. When crappie are suspended, fishing can be extremely tough, but you can usually catch them if you can get your jig down to their depth level and then swim it. Of course, to catch them, you must first find them, and this is best accomplished with a good, sensitive grasp. Put it to use by looking for suspended crappie close to some form of structure. This could be out over deeper water, close to some key irregular feature like a bluff, a ledge, a high spot, a long deep point, or simply over some type of deep cover like stumps. Using ultralight gear and casting, you can cover a lot of water at different depth levels quickly. In addition to all the enjoyment it provides, ultralight offers another plus. In clear water, you don't run the risk of spooking the fish simply because you can stay a safe distance away as you cast to them. It's important to use the lightest weight jig possible when casting. A 1/16 ounce works better than an 1/8, and an 1/8 works a whole lot better than a 1/4 ounce. Lighter jigs allow for more natural presentation and allow the jig to be worked above the fish. Heavier jigs fall faster, making them much more difficult to control, and depth and speed control are extremely important. Crappie prefer to feed above themselves rather than to the side or below, so they'll see an offering falling slowly above them much better. Fat fish, thick fish. Going back down. When fishing suspended crappie, it's best to use a countdown method. Now this will vary, but basically a crappie jig falls in water at the rate of about 1 foot per second. When using line test, let's say from 4 to 8 pound test. When you've established the depth that the fish are using, you want to cast out beyond the school. The instant the lure hits the surface, retrieve any slack line that was created, keeping the rod tip up in front of you, and start counting 1001, 1002, and so on. When you reach 10, your lure should be approximately 10 feet deep. To catch suspended crappie, you have to stay constantly aware of the depth that you found them in, at the depth at which your jig is swimming, and the speed of your jig. Now let me tell you about another high percentage way of catching deep water crappie when they're relating to submerged isolated cover. By cover, I mean anything from a stump to a bush or even man-made planted cover. Naturally, the first step is to locate the cover and the depth that the fish are using. Again, your liquid crystal graph can be a big help here. Once you've found the area you're planning to fish, a very productive and enjoyable technique is vertical fishing. Quite often, when crappie go deep, let's say below 20 feet, they can become stubborn and it's difficult to make them bite. But if you can manage to get a jig in front of them and keep it there, you can usually entice a strike. For me, vertical fishing is the only answer when this occurs. So let me tell you how I go about it. I have my LCG mounted on the bow of my boat with the transducer mounted on the trolling motor. Therefore, as I move along, I instantly know that any fish or cover I see is directly under my transducer. When I spot something that looks inviting, I immediately reverse my trolling motor and back up approximately 9 feet. Then using a 9-foot fly rod with an ultralight underspin attached, I lower my bait to the top of the cover. Now, the particular rig I prefer to use here is a double hook drop rig. Let's take a look at it. Here I have a 1/4 ounce bell weight sinker on the bottom of my line, mainly for feel. 12 to 14 inches above that, I've tied a drop loop with a 1/16 ounce jig. And then 12 to 14 inches above that, I've tied another 1/16 ounce jig. Now with the double hook rig, it's possible to catch 2 fish at one time, but the real purpose of it is to present the bait at 2 different depth levels. Whether the crappie are holding tight to cover or slightly above it, both areas will be covered. And since crappie feed in an upward position, this outfit gives me more of an edge. Tell you what, watch this video clip and it should give you a good idea of what I'm talking about. Uh-oh, look at here. That is a lot of fish right there, my boy. Ooh-wee. That's gonna get me down. Look here. Oh, look at him. You got every hook in him. Hung in him. Look at that. Easy. Easy. Oh. Nah. Well, I'll tell you, you can't get it better than that. You can't get it better than that. Boy, oh boy, let me tell you, that's a surefire method. Now here's another one that some fishermen will probably find just a little unconventional. No question about it, there are plenty of spots to reach with big crappie to catch if you're willing to take a plunge into wade fishing. For the adventurous angler looking for a hard-to-get-to place, this is a wade to go. Wading is a very productive tactic that allows you to fish for those shallow water spawning crappie that rarely see a jig. And it works well when lake levels are extremely low or high or in areas where a boat just can't go. It offers a number of advantages. You can stay completely silent, presenting a smaller image as compared to a boat. So you're less likely to be seen or heard by a fish, even at close range. You're also closer to the water, so you can pay much closer attention to likely looking fish habitat. Fishing this way provides you a sort of built-in depth finder. You can actually feel the bottom begin to drop away under you as you approach a hole or ledge. You act as your own built-in temp gauge too. You'll be able to instantly sense warmer and cooler water areas. And you'll constantly know what the bottom consistency is. Now this can be a good tip-off to fish location. Soft, yucky bottom areas are not attractive to fish, but firm clay, gravel, or sand bottoms with cover are ideal locations. Also, old, soft, mucky areas are tough to wade and can occasionally be dangerous. Plowing my way through knee-deep, yucky mud isn't my idea of fun either. That ain't bad. Bad at all. active fish, but it also works great when fish are in a negative mood. Some folks call it slip corking, and it works wonders in shallow, clear water. Slip corking allows you to stay a safe distance from the fish, yet it lets you fish tight to the cover or just over the top of it, and your jig swims as you retrieve it. When you stop your retrieve, the jig swings back under the cork. It'll pop right there. Good one right there. Yes. Yes. Nice. Now let's spend a minute and take a look at how the slip cork outfit is rigged. It consists of an adjustable slip knot, a bead, a small highly visible cork, a split shot, and a jig, all playing an important role. As you can see, the slip knot is nothing more than a short piece of nylon line that is larger in diameter than the monofilament. It's tied very tight around the line where it won't slip up and down unless you're forcing it, and it keeps the jig at a constant depth. When the cast is made, the cork slides down against the split shot and the bead follows. Here, all the weight is close together, and this is good for casting control and accuracy. Once the rig hits the water, the slip bead and cork will slide back to the slip knot and stop as the jig settles to the set depth. Okay, what's the bead for? It prevents the slip cork from sliding through the slip knot. Keep in mind, the smaller the slip knot, the better you'll be able to cast, because many times your knot will be somewhere between the tip of your rod and your reel, depending, of course, on the depth you're fishing. The smaller the knot, the better it will pass through the rod guides. Now for the cork. I prefer a small one, just big enough to float. Too big a cork can spook fish as it hits the surface, and more terminal weight is required to float and work it correctly. Also, always use a highly visible cork so you'll always be able to keep an eye on it. Now let's discuss the split shot and its purpose. First, it provides a little more weight to help you with casting accuracy and distance. It also helps provide more action to the jig and stabilizes your line from the point where it's pinched on the line to the cork. And finally, and most importantly, it helps prevent the fish from swimming with the jig unnoticed. Without the split shot, a crappie could swim with the jig horizontally several feet, possibly into cover, or he could swim up with the jig. The small amount of additional weight the shot provides will force the soft-biting crappie to go down instead of up, pulling the cork under. And naturally, that's what we all like to see. Okay, moving along, let's discuss another popular technique. I call this one long poling. It's a known fact that when cover is present at the depth that the crappie are using, they're drawn to it like a magnet, regardless if they're shallow or deep. And even when they're suspended out deep, you can bet that some form of cover is not far away. Long poling is a very successful method of catching numbers of fish when they move in tight to thick cover. The shallower the cover, the more effective long poling is, especially in stained to off-colored water. When crappie are relating to thick cover, I'm totally convinced you'll catch far more fish by vertical fishing than you would casting with ultralight gear. It allows you to fish an area much more thoroughly and quicker. Plus, the type of equipment you're using provides tremendous leverage for lifting and pulling the crappie away and out of the cover. This prevents fish from hanging up and possibly spooking other catchable fish in the same spot. When long poling, it's not uncommon to sit in one place and catch a dozen or more fish in a 2-foot area. So you can stay back 10 feet or more and fish a large area without moving your boat an inch. No doubt about it, you'll do a whole lot better fishing areas with cover vertically, and it's really a fun way to fish. Here again, remember to use the lightest weight jig you can. A 1/16 ounce with a 2/0 hook size works well. And you'll find that by fishing your jig a shade shallower than the fish are, you'll do better. Because as we mentioned earlier, crappie prefer to feed up above themselves rather than below or to the side. Like I said, crappie are a fish of all seasons, and they can be caught in lots of different places. Most of our river systems, for instance, are full of crappie. But to catch these tasty critters in moving water, several things must be considered. The current, location, boat position, type of equipment, technique, and presentation. It's important to recognize that crappie don't prefer fast-moving water areas, so they'll select and use places out of the strong flow, if possible. Areas like the mouth of creeks, slow current areas below a shoal on the inside bend of the river, flats off the main channel, behind objects such as treetops, stumps, wing dams, and any eddy areas along the river bank. It's a safe bet that crappie are not going to be all that active unless conditions are very stable. By this I mean stable weather conditions for the past several days with no major changes in water elevations or noticeable changes in water clarity. One of my favorite places to look for crappie in a river is along deep banks where cover extends from the shallows on out to deeper water quickly. When I can find this type of bank with scattered treetops, bushes, logs, or stumps, and an eddy exists, then I've usually found a crappie high spot. Come here. Come here with your flopping self. Now this next technique is not all that popular, but I'm here to tell you it's gaining popularity by leaps and bounds. Without question, it's one of the most productive methods I've ever seen to catch numbers of crappie year-round on a consistent basis. This system is called pulling, and there are a number of reasons that make this method of side trolling so effective. First, it allows you to cover a large area quickly. Second, your bait is exposed to more fish. Third, it permits you to maintain a constant contour depth level. Fourth, it allows you to cover a wider coverage area. And finally, pulling lets you keep your bait in the strike zone 100% of the time. Let's first define the word pulling. It's a technique that describes exactly what you're doing, and that's pulling the boat or side trolling it, but with one major difference. Instead of pulling your boat forward with a bow-mounted trolling motor, you're pulling your boat sideways with the trolling motor mounted a third of the way up from the stern. With it mounted here, you can maneuver the boat perfectly straight while maintaining excellent control as you move sideways. On each rod, two different colored jigs are rigged, approximately 12 to 14 inches apart, and these are then pulled within 2 feet of the bottom. It's important to recognize that the crappie located just off the bottom will be far more active than those suspended up high. 6.5 to 7 foot light action rods are best because most hits are just light taps. You'll be able to detect them much easier with light action rods, and you won't run the risk of tearing the lure out of the fish's soft mouth when the hook is set. Perhaps the real key to the success of this method of fishing is the coverage area. The coverage area is the actual width or span you're able to fish at the same time. For example, if you and a companion are fishing in a 16-foot boat using 3 rods each, you'll be covering almost 22 feet of width. This is a wide patch of territory as compared to what you'd be covering if you were simply pulling forward. There's no comparison in the number of hits you'll get with this method. There's simply not enough time for me to tell you all I'd like to about all the different ways to catch these tasty little fish. But maybe you've picked up a few new ideas to try on your next outing.